This is me 3 months ago on my way to bid on a crashed Lamborghini located on the other side of the country. I wore a suit out of respect for its Italian heritage.
Forget about it.
Up until this point, I've done weeks of research. I've dug up police records from when this car had crashed, digitally traced the exact roads where it swerved off into a ditch. I'm 3 hours early to make sure I don't miss it.
Bro. You're getting evicted, bro.
You didn't dress up for the Lambo auction?
Bro, I didn't know this.
A few friends sit down for moral support, and the auction begins at $51,000.
We're in. Okay, 52.
Already in the reddish.
53.
I'll cut the drama. I get outbid by some guy in Utah. However, I come to find the car did not hit the seller's reserve. It's been a week and the car is about to go live on auction once again in 14 minutes. I think we can make the numbers work at 62.5. Oh man, this is a pretty huge gamble. It's also in Maine. If we win, how am I even gonna get it home? Now, I actually didn't have to worry about that because this mystery Utah man outbid me once again.
Sold on approval.
Young hustler, you ready for that Lamborghini Gallardo? You ready for that?
Okay, I think it's been like 2-3 months since we've last spoken. Truth be told, I kind of gave up on this Lambo idea and moved on. But today, on March 18th, I just randomly went on Copart and found this Lamborghini Gallardo in Sacramento, which is like 30 minutes away from me. I didn't have time to study the damage or the history of the car, but given that it was an earlier model, I figured I shouldn't go over 42,000. The auction started hot, but with no mystery Utah bidder. Oh man, guys, I literally just found this listing like 30 minutes ago, and now we're on the hook for $40,000. But we got a Lambo. From here, I drove straight to the bank to pay for the car. The following day, I had to go get cleaned up out of respect for the Copart establishment, but then clear out the garage, street park the hypercar, fire sell the jet ski. With some space cleared up, I sped over to my local Copart lot just in time to see the car get loaded up onto the trailer. This thing does not look like a 2005 Gallardo. It's either some sort of special edition one or any one of the previous like 10 owners put on some sort of aftermarket body kit, but it looks sick. I couldn't believe my eyes. Seeing this thing in my garage, it didn't feel real. It was like a glitch. There's no way this thing is stock or California emissions compliant. It sounds insane. It felt like an earthquake. I was itching to see if the car actually ran and drove, but was really concerned about getting noise complaints.
I'm putting it back in.
It's not even loud.
Really?
I was too scared to get it past second gear, but it seemed to at least somewhat function until...
Things to avoid. Reversing up a hill is gonna kill you.
But apart from that, this thing appears to run and drive just fine. Y'all should have never let me have access to Copart. Now, my theory is that the reason this car may have been written off as totaled and sent to auction could be because of this left quarter panel right here. If this R and R stands for remove and replace, replacing this entire quarter panel up to insurance standards would likely be an insanely expensive job. But I think all that's really wrong with it is this part right here. There's also stuff like this heat shield. I don't think we need to replace the entire thing. Instead, we can just go like this. But now that I concluded that the car kind of works, it was time to start rebuilding. There was a few parts in the passenger seat, so I took those out. Some of these were solid and would actually save us a decent amount of money. But once I had inventory of that, I kind of just played spot the difference between this car and what a non-crashed one looks like, taking note of what parts I'll have to buy and what's worth trying to have fixed. From there, my work moved inside to research the damaged components and start ordering new parts. So far, I think we're into this car at a pretty good price, but this is when things can really go south. The next few days were filled with shrewd negotiations and a ton of lowballing on eBay. We'll break down all of the costs at the end, but I was actually able to source a few of the parts locally, and through that, I ended up meeting someone who actually knew the previous owner of the car. So a few phone calls later, I'm here with Gopi, the previous owner of the Lamborghini.
Yeah.
It ran and drove completely fine before the accident.
It ran perfect. You didn't get burned or anything like that.
Gopi ended up selling me the stock exhaust, catalytic converters, the original rear wing, a second key for the car, and the original wheels with tires. As cool as the aftermarket exhaust was, I needed the factory parts on in order to pass smog and actually register the car. I was actually able to find most of the parts I needed fairly easily, but there was one vacuum line that I needed in order to put on the stock exhaust that I couldn't find anywhere. I'm gonna come clean. I was about to do something a little sus, a little questionable in order to keep our costs down. I was gonna try to just straighten out and weld this impact bar that got bent in during the crash. However, I ended up deciding to just splash a little and buy a non-damaged impact bar. And in doing so, I was just deeply rewarded for my brief splurge of integrity. I just found this impact bar, and what do you know, it has the exact exhaust vacuum line that I couldn't find anywhere else connected to the bar. Double bubble. While I waited for that to come in, I noticed the car had a flat, so I went out, got it patched up, slapped it back on. I got a deal on this replacement bumper, but it was cracked, and so was this top panel, so I dropped both off with a plastic repair specialist who also agreed to fabricate the rest of this interior bracket that notoriously fails on these cars. Meanwhile, I dug into the interior. The door panels had this weird green mold, which got me worried about flood damage, but it wiped off pretty easily. I disinfected the whole area. Honestly, not sure what that was. Next problem, no stereo and an absolute wiring jungle left over from an aftermarket subwoofer in the front. I had to take some major risk pulling wires out, hoping I didn't kill anything essential. But for the radio, I picked up this OEM unit with a screen and somehow got it to turn on, only to be greeted with this anti-theft system asking for a code. I genuinely thought we were cooked, but this random eBay listing claimed they could crack it with just the serial number, so I gave it a go. I still can't believe that worked.
The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
But with that done, I turned to the battery. Up until now, I had to jumpstart the car pretty much every time. So I took the battery to Napa. It turns out it was still under warranty, so they just handed me a brand new one for free. I swapped it in, performed a deep clean and somewhat restoration of the front, and good deal. That worked out nice. Now by this point, enough parts had come in the mail and my dad was available, so it was time for the exhaust job, as well as the original cat. We got a base reading of 111 decibels and got to work. Taking this heat shield off revealed the exhaust. This thing looked sick, but unfortunately it had to go. Then came the sensors out of the cats and we had to lift the car and take off the wheels in order to unscrew the cats themselves. But with those out, we put in the original ones, followed by the actual mufflers, which allowed us to start the car and get a new California compliant reading of around 88 decibels. But anyways, we finished the job by putting on these new wheel well covers I had to buy, then the wheels, and I popped on these 2 undamaged impact bars. Then, in an attempt to just feel something, I removed the carbon wing and took a gamble, dropping it off with a Facebook Marketplace carbon repair listing. We'll see how that goes, but taillights were next up. One was completely chopped, but I poured my heart into restoring the other, and it actually turned out pretty great. That is, until I saw it next to the new one I bought. Turns out these taillights come in different shades. If you step pretty far back and you don't turn on the lights, it actually doesn't look that bad. I ended up paying up for one of the same shade off eBay. Taillight restoration, mission failed, but we move on. 2, the wobbly side mirror, which I pulled off and dropped off for paint matching. Then picked up the completed bumpers from the plastic repairman. His plan for this mounting bracket actually worked out pretty nice. And once the paint was cooked up, I had the car towed to the paint shop. But the wobbly mirror came home with me and I could instantly see the issue. Now listen, I don't know if this next part is up to code, maybe look away, but I just mixed together some JB Weld and applied it inside all the cracks. Say whatever you want, man. I no longer had a wobbling side mirror. But while I was dilly-dallying, that quarter panel I made a big deal about earlier was welded and prepped. No clue how they really did it, but it looked super nice. And soon enough, I just received the call that all the parts have been successfully painted, and the fellas have agreed to help me put the parts on at their shop. So if we're able to put it together today, I'll be attempting to drive it home tonight. And once at the shop, freak welded mirror, door panel, tail light, top bumper piece. Time for the big boy. I spent like a couple hours screwing it in from all kinds of different angles, eventually finishing with these grid trim pieces. Engine bay cover. Name tag. We left the spoiler off since its lift system was jammed, but this thing was looking nice. Now driving home was stressful. Low gas, check engine light, mystery dash warning, no registration, no license plate, just vibes. Although a terrifying experience, I did make it home in one piece. However, we still had work to do. I removed this crusty cover, figured out the mystery dash light was for the active spoiler, so I did a delete on the entire system and used the plug trick I found online to kill the error code. Then reinstalled the stock spoiler without the lift system. Why not the sick carbon fiber one? Because this is how I got it back. Now I did clear the check engine code with a scanner. I was relieved that it's a very common code and I think it could come back, but from my research, worst case, I'll need a $1,500 sensor module. But it could also just be a loose nut on the cat sensors or a code left over from the aftermarket exhaust. With the car complete and with at least for now a clear dash, I was ready to break down the cost of this project. However, I first had to take it on my first proper joyride.
That's not bad. It's not bad.
This thing is nuts. And so the time has finally come to break down the cost. But while you guys were looking away, in an effort to lower our total cost, I did manage to sell the exhaust for $500 on Marketplace.
Get your money up, not your funny up.
And I went through the trouble of listing the old taillights on eBay. They did sell, so we got back another few $100 there. I also bought a front emblem that hasn't come in yet. And realistically, if I want to keep the car and be able to put a ton of miles on it worry-free, I would have to spend a good amount of money on preventative maintenance. The clutch will eventually have to get replaced, so I don't want to make it seem like the car is perfect as it sits. So that disclaimer aside, the current price comes out to just over $57,000, and I think the more important...
Here in my garage, just bought this new Lamborghini here. It's fun to drive up here in the Hollywood Hills. But you know what I like a lot more than materialistic things?